Welcome back to Feed the Dark podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in again. This week we are discussing Salem's Lot from Stephen King, which is his second published book. This one actually I've had on my shelf since I was like in high school, but for whatever reason I never got around to reading the whole thing. I guess it's because I went through like a year or two where I read so many long Stephen King books that I just kind of got worn out and I just kept buying them and I got a little bit intimidated and would just get a bit drained and would want to read more, shorter works. So I guess it's been like about like 16 or 17 years that this thing has been this copy has been just sitting there, totally untouched. But I am so glad that I finally got to read this thing because oh my god, my list of Stephen King books is just totally out of whack from what I've been telling everyone for the past 10 years. I'm really happy that I've been rereading this stuff, but this book freaking rules. So it's about this character, Ben Mears, who returns to this town he grew up in, Salem's Lot, because he had a very strange experience there when he was younger and it traumatized him. So now he's returning to write about it and to get some inspiration. And along the way, he meets a plethora of really well realized characters, which is something that I didn't really say too much about Carrie. And just that this is the first book that is published by King that I feel like the town is really alive. I mean, this is kind of like I read The Stand a bit ago, and this sort of does for me what The Stand did, just in terms of really defining the world, because how he describes just not just the certain mansions and how it looms over everything, but just how he delves into different characters and jumps back and forth between random people in the town and just all of their dirty laundry and even characters that you might not see ever again. It really just paints a full picture, and I was incredibly impressed because yeah, I mean I've given King slack sometimes, but this is just how he world builds is unlike maybe any author that I could think of off the top of my head right now. At least how consistently he does it, and that is the most impressive thing about Salem's Lot to me, originally called Jerusalem's Lot. Okay, I got a little sidetracked because I was super excited about that. But from there, this sort of becomes a Dracula in a rural town type story. So King described it best himself. He was really obsessed with Dracula, and he taught Dracula. And then he kind of thought, well, what if Dracula was here now? And then he thought that, oh well, he would probably get hit by a taxi or something in New York City. But what if he was in like a rural area and was able to just slowly take that over? So yeah, really don't want to give anything away about this, but I will say that it is so refreshing to read a story where no one's safe for characters who you do not think would bite the bullet, and they either become vampires or something else happens to them, or they go in totally different directions that are very unexpected. And I had a great time. This felt like reading a classic novel, at least to me personally. It was yeah, I think it was like a 10 out of 10 book. This is like my top 15 horror novels of all time, which I really didn't see coming. I guess I should have, because I know it's such a popular work, but oof, my God. Oh, the one thing I will say is, I guess this is before female characters were well developed. The one love interest I think is a little flat, but they're, how can I phrase this? They're the female characters are flat, but they also have endearing aspects about them, so it makes it a bit less aged. But I could definitely see some complaints there, because definitely the male characters kind of pick up the mantle for a lot of this. But the villain, I didn't even get into the villain, Barlow. Oh my goodness, I mean, once again, it's basically Dracula, but his interpretation of that and what it would be like if Dracula existed now is awesome. And the slow just decay of his town is so freaking cool. There are so many sequences that actually legitimately frighten me, and I don't really. I mean, I like vampire stories a lot. I think they're cool as shit, but I'm not like one to be terrified by vampires. But there was a sequence, I guess just to hint at it, with a vampire outside a window that actually kind of gave me chills, which is super impressive. So kudos to King. And yeah, no, I totally get why King says that this is his favorite one, or at least he did say that for a great number of years. I'm not too sure what his favorite one his favorite work of his is now. I know he says Pet Sematary is the scariest, but he liked this the most, at least for he's mentioned that in earlier interviews. I will say that nothing really crazy happens for the first half of this book, and it's a pretty long book, so that could turn some readers off. But I mean, I've read reviews where people count this as a flaw. I was pretty engaged for the entire buildup of it, so it wasn't necessarily a flaw for me. But it's still worth noting for the first like 300 or so pages of this, depending on what edition you have. It will just be about the characters, and I mean, there's not even like too much vampire hinting going on until a bit later on, so that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I just really hope that you guys pick this one up because this one is very much worth reading. And I gotta be honest, I lied before. I think I mentioned once or twice on this podcast that I liked his son's writing more, but after reading this and the book I read after this, which I'm gonna get into next episode or whenever this airs, yeah, that's not true anymore. Joe Hill's great. I love you, but Stephen King, I kind of forgot how great you were, or at least how great your earlier stuff is. I know people really like his later work as well, but his earlier stuff is just, it's so good. It's not as, I will say it's not as well written as some of the classic works of literature, obviously, but just for like this kind of writer, oh my God, this was a blast. So yeah, 10 out of 10 in my top 15 power books of all time. Check it out. Thank you again for tuning in. You could find me on Libsyn, Spotify, and YouTube.